Good evening to those in Europe and good afternoon to those in the United States of America. Jó estét kívánunk azoknak, akik Európából néznek minket, és azoknak, akik az Egyesült Államokból pedig szép délutánt, így szombat délutáni napot. Bună seara pentru toți care ne văd din Europa, din România, Ungaria și o după masă plăcută pentru cei care se alătură nouă din Statele Unite. Numele meu, my name is Zsolt Moldovan. We are going to do this broadcast in English. My name is Zsolt Moldovan, and next to me is Peyton Snyder. We are broadcasting from Transylvania, Romania. This region being a multi-ethnic one, the city in which we are based has a couple of different names. In Romanian is Cluj-Napoca, Kolozsvár in Hungarian, or Klausenburg in German. You are watching a Facebook live stream of the Hungarian Human Rights Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, just a brief summary. HHRF has been established in New York in 1976 by Hungarian American youth. They were outraged about the fact that the US government of their own government was giving preferential treatment to the communist Romania led by dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, while the country's Hungarian minority was facing forced assimilation. For the past 49 years, we have been monitoring the human rights situation of Hungarian communities in countries surrounding Hungary, such as Romania, Slovakia, Serbia, and Ukraine. We are headquartered in New York with offices in Budapest, Hungary, and here in Cluj-Kolozsvár. I am the local office manager since 2002, and I also work as a journalist. So this is me. My brothers-in-arms for tonight's broadcast is Peyton Snyder. He's a fourth-generation Hungarian-American. He has been living here in Kolozsvár for the past 6 months as the recipient of the Reconnect Transylvania Plus scholarship. This grant was established by the Hungarian Human Rights Foundation with the aim to allow young Hungarian-Americans to rediscover and strengthen their Hungarian roots while being part of the local Hungarian community. Peyton volunteers at RMDS, which is the Hungarian political party here in Romania, and teaches English at the Kolozsvári Református Collegium, which is a Hungarian language high school here in the heart of Transylvania. Did I miss anything, Peyton?
No, that all sounds good to me. I'll just add that I'm very happy to be here speaking to you guys tonight.
Okay, so you tuned into a dispatch about Romania, about the Romanian elections. As you could hear from my introduction, we at HHRF have a special interest about what happens in Romania, because the country's Hungarian community, according to the 2022 census, there's still a 1 million strong Hungarian community living in Romania. And we care about them a lot, about their well-being and about their future. So let's delve in. Romania is at a dangerous crossroads like never before in the past 35 years, since the fall of communism. The events preceding and following the first round of the presidential elections held on November 2022 put the country in the international limelight. The conversation on Romania is fueled by partisanship and flooded by conspiracy theories. Therefore, it's very difficult to get a very clear picture. Now I'm going to ask Peyton to establish the basic facts so the viewers can orient themselves.
Yeah, so just a quick note before we get in. The format for today, we're going to try to keep things under an hour, just kind of give you guys a broad overview of what's going on politically in Romania since the fall, and it's really ongoing, as you'll discover. After that, we're hoping after 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so, we'll have time to take some questions if there are any in the audience. So we will ask that people hold their questions till the end, and we'll try to answer them, the good ones that come into the chat there at the end. So to begin with sort of an overview of how Romania's political system works, it's a little bit different than America's system. Romania has a president and it has a parliament. The president is elected to 5-year terms. The parliament is elected every 4 years. So in 2024, we had a kind of strange occurrence where the presidential elections were kind of overlapping with the parliamentary elections. So what that means is in the fall, we had 3 elections back to back. We had November 24th, the first round of the presidential election. Romania's system is similar to France. So if no one gets 50% of the vote in the first presidential election, then you have to do a second round 2 weeks later. And that's what happens pretty much every time in Romania. Okay. And then on December 1st, we had the parliamentary election, so a week after the first presidential election. And then originally, the final presidential election, the second one, was scheduled to be held on December 8th. So just kind of keep these facts in mind as we progress here. Something to keep in mind with this system, something that we'll kind of get into here, is that it can allow for strange things to happen. If a candidate scores really well in the first round, they advance to the second round if they're one of the top 2 candidates. And if sort of moderates are split, if the moderate vote is split between a bunch of different candidates, then someone who's kind of radical or fringe, whatever word you'd like to use, if they have a big group united behind them, they can actually advance to the next round.
And actually, this is something that has happened here in Romania before. Back in the 2000 elections, presidential elections, we have had an ultra-nationalistic candidate. His name was Corneliu Vadim Tudor from the Greater Romania Party, and he got into the second round together with one of the former presidents of Romania, Ion Iliescu, and so these 2 candidates were the only options, and neither one of them was a good one. And we ended up almost like 2/3 of the society ended up voting for Iliescu with really having our fingers on our noses because he was a stinky candidate, but we just had to vote for him because the other option was even worse.
And so certainly strange things can happen. Now, kind of rewinding back to the fall, I'd like to set the stage for what things were like, what we were expecting going into these elections. So kind of the main development that we at HHRF had been tracking, but also observers of Romanian affairs, is that in recent years we've seen a sort of a rise of what you would call a sort of far-right nationalist political sentiment in the country. Now, of course, this is happening across Europe and in other regions of the world as well, so this isn't restricted to Romania, but it was happening in Romania as well. The main nationalist party in this setting was the AUR. That's how we pronounce this kind of this acronym here, AUR. That's the Alliance for the Union of Romanians. This is a relatively new party. It was established, I think in 2020 or 2019, and they've kind of emerged as the newest nationalist party, but this is a tradition. There's a nationalist tradition in Romania's democratic politics going back to the 1990s. And so something we were worried about at HHRF, something other observers had been concerned about, was how much of the vote would AUR get in this election, because a lot of the polling, as we'll see in a second here, suggested that they may very well have performed second place, perhaps, in the elections. And there have been some instances in the past of sort of tension and even conflict between members of the AUR and members of the Hungarian community in Romania. So yeah, their sort of political assent was something that we were a bit concerned about going into it.
Exactly. The last poll before the first round of the presidential election, which was held in November, the beginning of November, this is the chart that came out in the last poll. So the president of the greatest Romanian party, Marcel Ciolacu from PSD, he got 25% of the votes, and on coming second was the George Simion. He's the president of AUR. So this is what we were expecting and fearing, and it turned out in the end that even a worse scenario materialized. But as you can see, otherwise the so-called moderate candidates like Elena Lasconi from USR, which is a center-right kind of progressist party. She came third. Mircea Joană, who is a former prime minister and presidential candidate who was working as a NATO deputy secretary for the past years. He came fourth, and so on. And the most important thing for the Romanian society, for the moderate Romanian society, was that somehow to really close off Simeon, and this is how we entered into the first round of the presidential elections.
Yeah, and one thing I would just like to point out with this chart here, this in purple, this is where Călin Georgescu was polling in early November, so not very high, just at 5.4%. Yeah, this was kind of the situation we were expecting here with the polling. Now, the results that came in on election night were very, very different from what we initially expected. As votes were being counted on election night, it became clear early on that Georgescu had taken a significant lead. So despite polling only 5% in early November, he actually quickly emerged to be the front runner of the election, and by the time all the votes were counted, he had reached 23% of the vote, right? So this was very different from what the polling had kind of suggested would happen. And really, it's hard to sort of describe, but on that night, it was a night of total shock for a lot of Romanian society. Many people had never really heard of Călin Georgescu prior to his victory in the first round of the election. And we'll sort of discuss his campaign and why it was that many people hadn't heard of him up to that point. But really, that's the message I would emphasize for that night, is that we were all very surprised by the result. Simeon kind of far away from second place. And another interesting development, we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about Lasconi, but Lasconi only barely beat Ciolacu. I think the difference was only 1,000 votes or so. But what this means is that the two people who took victory and would have advanced to the second round of the presidential election, the final round, they were both kind of outsider candidates, right? So Georgescu, we'll talk about him more in a second, and Lasconi, who's a sort of reformist, center-right figure. And so here we have a comparison of, just kind of drive the point home, that polling data I showed you a second ago here on the left, and then the actual results of the election on November 24th on the right. So as you can see, that purple got way bigger. Georgescu took a lot more votes than anyone was expecting, and other candidates underperformed. So Ciolacu significantly underperformed the polls, and Simeon also underperformed as well.
Yeah, actually, the only candidate who did better next to Călin Georgescu was the Hungarian candidate, Hunor Kelemen,
the green here,
the president of the RMDS, the DHRF, which is the Hungarian party. He did slightly better, and actually this is like the realistic percentage of what he got, because the Hungarian minority here in Romania accounts for something like 5% of the population.
Yeah. So, who is Călin Georgescu? There's a lot we could say about him. I'll try to give you guys kind of the most important salient facts as I see it. And we'll try to be impartial here and just give you the straight up information. There's been lots of reporting and lots of kind of sensational coverage of this. We're just going to try to give you guys the straight facts. So, Georgescu, by training and occupation, is an agronomist and a soil scientist. In the 1990s, he worked in different offices of the Romanian national government, the federal government. So for a while, he was in, I believe, the environmental ministry, which would make sense given his career. He also did a little bit of time, I believe, in the Romanian Department of State. So he was someone who was kind of known to people maybe really deeply immersed in Bucharest political life, but wasn't someone who was really very well known at that point outside of Bucharest. In the 2000s, he worked for the UN. He actually worked for the UN for, I think, in all, like 15, 16 years, so quite a while, as a kind of advisor on environmental affairs. In 2020 is when he really kind of enters Romanian politics in a significant way, and he actually joins, originally he was a member of AUR, which is the party that, as we've alluded to, is now run by or headed by Georgia Simeon. We're not going to get into the details of this, but Georgescu didn't always agree with Simeon, and so he left the party in 2022. But the important thing to take away from this is that he kind of emerged from that sort of nationalistic right-wing milieu that the AUR represents. And now we can talk a little bit about Georgescu's campaign. And again, we're just going to try to cover the basic facts here because we could spend all day talking about this. He conducted, would you agree as well, it's safe to say, a highly irregular campaign?
Well, it's at least.
Yeah, highly irregular. What's interesting about it is that he bypassed most of the major media outlets. So, for instance, when we were watching the debates, he didn't participate in the debates. If you watched most of the kind of mainstream cable news channels, he didn't really make appearances or interviews on those. Really, the bulk of his campaign was conducted through TikTok, right? So he's very avant-garde in this sense. Now, his videos on TikTok, you can find a lot of them yourselves. I would encourage you to research them if you're interested. They're strange, especially from an American perspective. They're going to strike you as kind of strange. They promote what I call these esoteric right-wing messages. So he talks a lot about kind of spiritual renewal in Romania. He speaks in very sort of mystical terms a lot of the time, and also mixes in a lot of his expertise as an environmentalist, as an environmental advisor, mixes that in as well. But he promotes a lot of these messages about renewal and purification of Romania. Related to that is he's made some positive remarks about these kind of fascistic figures from Romania's past. We're not going to talk about them in any detail, but there was a movement called the Iron Guard in Romania in the 1930s and 1940s. Sort of mystic, ultra-Orthodox, ultra-nationalist movement. And he made positive statements about them, which is a matter of concern for minorities in the country, including Hungarians. Because of a history of sort of ethnic animosity that the Iron Guard was part of. He also, and you might have read something about this in the newspapers in America, he criticized NATO's role in the EU, Romania's role in NATO, Romania's role in the EU, and has argued for kind of a more sovereigntist approach to Romanian foreign policy. But his exact policy positions often aren't very clear because he's producing these videos that are 30 seconds, 1 minute maybe, and again, they're kind of more aesthetics-based, some would say vibes-based than really policy-based. That's kind of an important thing to note here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and it was very, very interesting how the country switched back to parliamentary election mode after the shocking results of the first round of the presidential election. And people had to come to senses after what happened, and the parties had to somehow find their way in the new environment. And in that week between the first round of the presidential election and the parliamentary election, it was a very, very confusing time for everybody, because people were trying to find out as much about Călin Georgescu as possible, and also, on the other hand, to focus what was really important, to find a kind of working government for the future. That would mean that to have like a coalition to lead the country, and this coalition should not be somehow related to Georgescu or AUR in any way.
Yeah. So, I mean, anecdotally, I was at MBS headquarters on election night, November 24th, that is, the first round of the presidential election. And the mood was definitely one of shock and surprise when it became clear that he'd taken a big lead and was ultimately going to win the first round. Because a lot of people, as I said, hadn't really heard of him before. He wasn't active. You didn't see him on the mainstream Romanian television stations. You didn't see coverage about him in the Romanian newspapers. His whole campaign was sort of conducted over TikTok.
I remember the night of the election night here in Romania. The major TV networks were like trying to find things out about Georgescu. Who the hell this guy is?
Yeah, and as Zolt's kind of alluded to, So after that election on November 24th, the presidential election, the whole country is switching gears to the parliamentary election. But we spent a lot of that week collectively as Romanian society sort of discovering who this guy was, Georgescu. And so over the week, we found more videos that he'd released in the past were unearthed. People started whispering and talking about the guy. But really, most of the country found out who he was after the election had already happened, which is sort of irregular, right?
Now, I would suggest, let's talk about the RMDS campaign a little bit.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll kind of put a pin in Georgescu for now and come back to him later because people might have questions about that, and his story is kind of central to the story of the 2024 Romanian elections. But let's focus for a minute, if we can, on the parliamentary election and specifically what RMDS was campaigning to achieve, what their goals were in this cycle. So they campaigned on a platform of common sense. Józan in Hungarian was kind of their slogan. So in addition to their kind of historic traditional mission of upholding minority rights for the Hungarian minority in Romania, they campaigned on kind of educational reforms. Kind of important to this actually is for Hungarians getting better Romanian language education, better Romanian language materials in the classrooms. It might surprise some people because, yes, as a minority rights party, a minority advocate party, they, of course, want to preserve Hungarian identity, but it's also very important to them that the Romanian instruction be of a high quality so their children can participate in Romanian public life and in the economy as well. So that was an important part of their campaign. They also discussed very sensible, we would call them pretty moderate policies of kind of reforming family policy, encouraging people to have more children, making their lives a little bit easier. And infrastructure investments. We'll talk a little bit more about infrastructure in a minute, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of the Hungarians in Romania live in the eastern, more mountainous region of the country that is kind of underdeveloped. So infrastructure is always an important theme for RMDS.
If you think about it, these are like so-called boring topics for elections. Yeah. So we were reeling up for a boring election period here in Romania, and everything changed after the first round of the presidential election. The most important thing in Romanian society, Romanian politics for RMDS, representing the Hungarian minority, is to go over the 5% threshold, which is the threshold to get into the parliament. And because the population of the Hungarian population is just maybe 1% higher than 5%, it means that there is going to be needed a very, very high grade of mobilization on behalf of the Hungarian population to pass the threshold. And this seemed to be, before the first round of the presidential election, this seemed to be like the real challenge for the Hungarian party. But after the first round of the presidential election, this wasn't a problem anymore.
Yeah, we'll see why. We'll see why that was the case here in a second. Absolutely. So here, maybe Zsolt can spend a couple minutes kind of going over the parliamentary election results that came in on December 1st.
Right. So a week after the presidential election, Romania was having the parliamentary election. And as I told you before, this is important because somehow the new government is going to be set up by the results of the parliamentary election. First, as it was expected, came the Social Democrat Party, which is called by acronyms the PSD. They got over 2 million votes, which accounted to 22% of the votes which were cast. And it was also not a surprise that the second party which came in was the AUR party, which is this nationalistic party led by George Simeon. They got very close to PSD, and this is a very worrying development. And another party which was governing the Romania for the past 4 years, the PNL, which is the National Liberal Party, actually they underperformed quite heavily. and they came in third, a little bit over 14%. And on the fourth came the USR, which is this moderate center-right party, very progressist, very urban party. They came in fourth, and as you go down, there were a couple of more parties which came into which surpassed the 5% threshold, and luckily the RMDS, which came in sixth. You can see their name in Romanian, Uniunea Democrată Maghiară din România. This is the RMDS. They overperformed. They scored very highly.
And I'll talk about those results in a second. Yeah.
Exactly. And the seventh party which passed the threshold was the party which was on which's platform Călin Georgescu ran. So this is like a completely new party. They never entered Romanian parliament. So this is the so-called Georgescu effect, that they entered the parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we'll talk a little bit about the RMDS results specifically, keeping in mind the minority rights situation in the country. Again, here's just kind of a visualization of the results. RMDS with 6.4% of the vote did significantly better than a lot of us had hoped for. Absolutely. And receiving over 590,000 votes, this is actually the best performance they've had since, I believe, 2004. We went back and looked, which is significant for a couple of reasons, because the Hungarian population here has shrunk a good bit in that time, with a lot of people emigrating and the population getting a little bit older, like we're seeing across Europe. So the fact that they were able to achieve this really strong result was really quite significant. And this really wasn't something that too many people had set their hopes on, set their sights on, I don't think, but they actually managed to pick up 2 additional seats in parliament. So they didn't just retain their position, they actually improved their position in parliament, which was really a good, in a sense, a very good development. However, a lot of people, commentators and even some leaders within the party, they partly attribute this development to fear. So they partly attribute this strong performance to the fear that was kind of stoked by Georgescu's performance in the November 24th election, right? Again, this is what made this election cycle interesting, was that we had them all back to back. So each election was sort of a response to the one that was happening the previous week. After Georgescu wins the first round of the presidential election, and the country is learning all about his sort of nationalist political inclinations, and that could be worrying for Hungarians. A lot of ethnic Hungarians in the country were more motivated to go out and vote, it seems like, and we can partly kind of attribute that result to that development with Georgescu. Yeah.
Right-wing parties together. There were 3 right-wing parties which entered the parliament.
Far-right parties.
Far-right parties. Yeah. So like the AUR party, the SOS Romania party, yeah, and this the party of the young people, yeah, which is backing Georgescu, and they all together score something like a third of the votes.
Yeah.
So it was very important for Romanian society to try to isolate them, and yeah, to make a kind of working coalition which could govern the country without them being present in the Romanian government. So after the parliamentary election, it was very important for the other parties, for the moderate parties, for the European-leaning parties, for the NATO alliance-leaning parties, to try to achieve a kind of governing coalition through, yeah, negotiations.
Absolutely.
And there were 4 parties initially which were part of the discussion: the PSD party, the PNL, the RMDS, and the USR party, and as a 5th wheel was the other national minorities except the Hungarian minority.
Yeah, and they ended up being important. They usually aren't very important in the grand scheme of things, but there is a clause in the Romanian constitution, it's good, that allots a minimum of 1 representative for each of the 19 nationally recognized ethnic minorities in the country. So the Hungarians are by far the farthest, and with RMDS, they never have any trouble making, they're politically represented, I should say. But you have smaller minorities like the Armenians, There's still a fair number of Germans in some places, the Transylvanian Saxons and others.
Italians, Czechs,
Slovaks, Serbs, Ukrainians, you can go down the list.
19 minorities in all, and
Yeah.
their importance after in these negotiations was very important because USR ended up outside of the governing coalitions, so the other three parties needed those 19 members of the Romanian parliament in order the government to pass the vote in the parliament.
Yeah.
And this governing coalition came to life, and RMDS is represented in the government by two ministries.
Yeah, and so I kind of mentioned this before. The Ministry of Development has historically been important to RMDS, and that was known as sort of one of their conditions for entering into another governing coalition. Because, like I said, you kind of get to control or shape, influence a little bit the development of the country, and this is something that's important when a lot of the ethnic Hungarians live in a less developed region, right? But this time they also got the finance ministry. This is a major development. This is the first time that RMDS has ever held that ministry before. And for better or for worse, this is a really important ministry in Romania right now because Romania has been running on a sort of a high budget deficit for a couple of years now, and really needs to get its finances in order. So it's kind of a hard job.
It's a very hard job, yeah.
Yeah. And here are the two ministers that RMDS has currently in the government. On the left, we have Attila Czechia, and then on the right, we have Baron Tancos. So Czechia is the Minister of Development, and then Tancos, the finance ministry. So he especially has a very tough job here, trying to get the country's finances in order. But it's a good position for the party, and it's good political experience, absolutely. All right, now we can talk a little bit about the sort of crisis that's unfolded in Romanian politics since the fall. And probably, if you read the newspapers, this is what you've heard about from Romania recently. So almost immediately after Ceausescu got elected, he overperformed so strongly where he was at in the polls that it raised a lot of questions. Again, like I said, I can remember on election night, people were immediately wondering, scratching their heads, how could this happen? Where did this guy come from? So on and so forth. So looking into his campaign, the Romanian state, so members of different Romanian ministries began to investigate his campaign and found some things that they were concerned with. And after November 24th, we started hearing more and more about this, and eventually a couple sort of key allegations were articulated against his campaign. And I've kind of highlighted the most important ones here. This one, failure to disclose sources of campaign financing. And to this day, I don't think this has been clarified. The Ceausescu campaign declared no spending.
Exactly.
They declared campaign spending of €0, 0 lei, which is obviously very questionable, especially given all of the videos that were circulating of him online. Someone had to pay for that. And that hasn't been rectified to this day, so they've not reported any campaign financing. It was also alleged by Romanian investigators, prosecutors, that there was a coordinated strategy on the part of the Ceausescu campaign to sort of get more exposure for their political advertisements. This is sort of hard to explain, but in Romania they have laws governing how political speech can be distributed online. So you'll notice, or I noticed during the campaign, that political messaging is given certain codes, and the social media algorithms sort of
recognize those codes.
They recognize those codes, and they sort of not limit, but they sort of restrict their reach within certain parameters. The Ceausescu campaign, or the videos of Ceausescu that were circulating on TikTok, they often did not comply with those legal requirements. So what that means concretely was that they were getting much more exposure than other forms of political advertisement and speech, and they weren't being flagged as political advertisements and speech to the viewers. Whereas every other political advertisement, if you saw it on Facebook, I got them while I was here, it would be very clearly marked as, hey, this is political speech. It wasn't like that with Ceausescu. So he kind of, in a sense, enjoyed an advantage there. And the third, perhaps the most dubious allegation, but it ended up in some ways being maybe the most important, was this allegation that he might have collaborated with foreign actors during his campaign. To this day, they haven't really produced very credible evidence testifying to that, but Romanian prosecutors, after reading a report that was released on December 4th by the Romanian intelligence agencies, they argued that he might have received some support from Russia. That was the accusation leveled against him at the time. And we're not going to go into how they reached that decision very much because, as I said, they haven't produced great evidence for that claim, but that was the claim made against him. And then on December 6th, the Constitutional Court of Romania, the highest court in Romania, decided to annul the presidential election results. So basically, they threw them out and decided the country would have to do them again. This is unprecedented in Romania, and it's practically unprecedented within the EU. There's only been one other instance, I think Austria in 2016, where they canceled an election, and that was for, I think, less serious reasons. So really a very major development and very concerning in many respects. And here's a sort of timeline of the crisis that I thought would be helpful because there's a lot of information to take in here. So he wins on November 24th, Ceausescu does. Now again, this doesn't mean that he was going to be the president of Romania. It means he was advancing to the second round of the election along with Elena Lesconi. So either one of them could have been elected at that point. The parliamentary elections were held on December 1st, as we've already discussed. It's on December 4th, the Romanian Supreme Court, the Romanian intelligence agencies released information suggesting Ceausescu might have received some Russian support. And it's on that basis that on December 6th, the Romanian Constitutional Court annulled the results. Now, on December 12th,
it gets interesting.
It gets really interesting here. So a investigative outlet, Romanian investigative journalist outfit, discovered that a lot of the support that Ceausescu had received wasn't the work of the Russians, but rather the work of rival political parties in Romania, chiefly the PNL. So it seems, this is sort of conjecture because the party sort of denies having too much involvement with this, but it seems that the PNL funded a sort of project to peel away votes from Simeon. So since Simeon and Ceausescu share a lot of voters, it seems that the PNL, or operatives within the PNL, some of them, thought it would be a good idea to try to promote Ceausescu in an effort to draw votes away from Simeon, hoping he wouldn't advance in the second round.
Actually, it makes sense from a political strategy.
It does. It makes sense. It's a very cynical move, but this is something that it's done here in Romania and in other regions where you have a kind of multi-party system. Sometimes you help out people you don't like, hoping that they peel off votes from people you don't like more.
Exactly.
So it's a strange calculus.
In this case, this time it was too successful.
Yeah, in this case, it didn't seem
backfired.
It's hard to say to what extent his performance, Ceausescu's strong performance, was a result of his own campaign, the TikToks he was putting out, versus the support that he got from PNL. But in any case, that happened. It seems that the PNL was supporting him. So that kind of threw a lot of cold water on this talk of Russian collusion, at least for the time being. Ceausescu appealed that determination, and the Romanian Constitutional Court didn't accept it. He also appealed that decision to the European Court of Human Rights, which basically abdicated responsibility, said that, understandably maybe, this is a Romanian affair. Brussels doesn't want to get involved, or Strasbourg doesn't want to get involved. It's not within their purview to do so. And new elections were set in January. New elections were set for May. So the next presidential election is set to take place on May 4th.
It is still unclear if Calin Georgescu is going to be allowed to run in the new rerun of the presidential elections. So far, we know that a couple of candidates have been put their names out forward. One of them is Crin Antonescu, who is the former president of PNL, and in the governing coalition of PSD, PNL, and RMDS. This was one of the key points of the negotiations, that they should all support one single candidate to stop the right turn in Romania.
We'll talk towards the end. We'll talk very briefly about their kind of strategy going forward for that May election, because it's still developing. Now, as you can imagine, with all of this kind of turmoil, I think would be the right word, unfolding. It's weakened public confidence in the democratic process in Romania. It's confused a lot of people, which is never great. Transparency is what you want in a democratic system. And really, a lot of pundits and politicians themselves, including Hunor and Kelemen Hunor, have referred to this period as like basically the greatest political crisis in Romania since 1989, when communism collapsed very abruptly. The Ceausescu regime collapsed very abruptly. Again, these allegations that we mentioned, or these revelations rather, that the PNL was supporting Ceausescu's content, have again put a lot of cold water on these claims of possible Russian collusion. And as of now, as of this broadcast, no new information has been released that really adds any substance to those allegations that Romanian prosecutors made towards Ceausescu. And it now seems, we've been tracking the polling since December, it now seems that Ceausescu's popularity is actually growing as a sort of, you could call him a sort of protest candidate, I think, against the political establishment. So, so that's the situation that we're at now.
And the crisis actually deepens because the incapacity of intelligence services and the incapacity of the Romanian authorities who are not able to come out with those proofs. Showing that there was something fishy about Călin Georgescu's campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, again, almost every institution involved in this decision is not looking very good right now. They're all implicated. Yeah. So we'll say a couple words, because this is a developing situation, but we'll say a couple words about the May 2025 elections. Again, the first round has been scheduled for May 4th. It seems unlikely that any candidate will receive 50% of the vote. So probably we will have a second round on May 18th. It's usually just accepted that there's going to be two rounds. And the list of candidates hasn't been finalized yet. This is a little bit different Romanian politics than American politics. Often the campaigning doesn't really start in earnest until 2 months before the election.
Actually, there is a rule for that.
Yeah, so the list of candidates hasn't been finalized, and there's still talk. I don't know if USERE, if they're going to field their own candidate or not. So right now there's a sort of debate happening amongst the moderates about whether they'll all rally behind one candidate or
Actually, USERE has an internal problem as well, because on one hand you have the party president, Elena Lasconi, who was supposed to run in the second round of the presidential elections, and she is she was very upset because of the annulment of the results, because she was hoping that she would beat Georgescu in the second round. And on the other hand, you have the mayor of the capital, the mayor of Bucharest, Nicușor Dan, who is also comes from USERE, and he already put his name forward. He wants to run in the new presidential elections. So we might have two candidates from USERE, or have one, or maybe have none.
Yeah, so it's a developing situation. We'll see what happens. Here is where the most recent polling more or less puts everybody. So Georgescu has a significant lead over the rest of the candidates. So this is a projection of how the vote would look for that first round election on May 4th. Georgescu has a clear lead by a significant margin. Antonescu, like Joel told us a moment ago, is the candidate that the current government, including RMDS, have sort of rallied behind. They've chosen him to, they're backing him for this election. Nicușor Dan is the mayor of Bucharest. Simeon, I don't think he's ruled out the idea of running for... Not yet,
but most probably if it comes down to that, he will just withdraw his candidacy and tell his supporters to back Georgescu, because they stem from the same root.
Yeah, so it's an open question. Most likely he's going to drop out. Similar question with Lasconi. We don't know if she's going to stay in or not. We just have to wait and see. And then there's this Șoșoacă figure, who's probably the most extreme right-wing candidate in Romania.
She's a very colorful person.
Very, very colorful person, definitely. It's a lot of funny quotes. But this is the situation as of right now. Again, it's moving, but that's what we're looking at. And this is a projection of how they basically would do Antonescu, the sort of unity candidate, and Georgescu in the second round of the election. So this is 23% of Romanian voters undecided. When the
It's
question
still a
is
very large chunk of the population which is undecided,
Yeah.
but it's troublesome that even though the common candidate is backed by PSD, PNL, and RMDS, he would still get less votes than Georgescu
Yeah.
alone, who is an independent, so-called independent candidate.
Yeah.
And another problem is that if you put together the votes of PNL, PSD, and RMDS, which were gotten in the parliamentary election, it's more than the
38%,
38% which Cristian Antonescu would get.
Yeah.
That means that he polls lower than
Yeah.
the three parties separately.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, it seems increasingly that Georgescu had probably a loyal, more kind of more ideological constituency or basis of support early on, but this has expanded as time has gone on, with people getting more and more frustrated with the political crisis unfolding in the country. He's kind of emerging as a sort of protest figure, sort of anti-establishment figure for a lot of people are kind of jumping on his bandwagon, as it were. Again, this is polling with if Nicu Jordan were to advance to the second round of the election, he wouldn't do any better. He would actually do significantly worse than Antonescu. So it seems like the two kind of leading moderate candidates right now that could run for the presidency, neither one of them has a great chance of beating Georgescu, it seems. But again, there's still a significant proportion of Romanian society in the blue here, 25%, that is sort of undecided, right? And then this is, in a sense, if you're afraid of Georgescu or you're concerned by his rise in popularity, this is maybe the most concerning result. I don't know if you want to break this down for us, Zsolt.
Yeah, so this slide shows us, like, in Romanian society, the trust, who people base their trust in. And Georgescu, with 51%, has the trust of the majority. None of the other political figures pass 50%. So this is really worrying. Because until now, those people who voted for Georgescu, they were kind of hidden. Mm-hmm. They did not show their faces, but now they are surfacing, and it's getting more and more worrying.
Yeah. So here on the right side, we have the kind of, I don't know how you would translate this maybe, but untrustworthy or distrust polling.
Yeah, so 51% of those who were polled said that they trust Georgescu, and 46% they said that they rather not trust him. Yeah,
but then that's the best figure amongst all the candidates in the field. So he's the most trusted major politician in Romania right now. And this last thing here is just kind of to take the temperature of where the whole country is maybe at politically. If the parliamentary elections were held today, it seems that this is the result that, according to the polling, that the result that would obtain. So the AUR has actually overpassed the PSD.
And this is something like a new development, mm-hmm. and it's due to the fact that after the first round of presidential elections and after the parliamentary election, there was another Georgescu, who was the candidate of the independent candidate, and George Simeon, who was the president of AUR, somehow rekindled their relationship. Yeah. They found each other's arm again, and the votes which were cast in the presidential election for Georgescu, they somehow migrated towards AUR, and that's why the AUR party right now is leading in the polls.
Yeah. So again, it seems that since December, that milieu, that sort of nationalistic milieu, has only gotten more popular. But the PSD, since really the 1990s, the biggest political party in Romania, is losing support. So that's what we're looking at the moment. So just to kind of wrap things up, we want to highlight a couple major key takeaways. Regardless of what happens in May, maybe these are some kind of key developments to look at, especially thinking about it from the minority rights perspective. So this is really significant for RMDS, is that the PSD and the PNL, which I mean, most governments since 1995 have been some configuration of PSD, PNL, and in RMDS maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very common sort of alliance, governing coalition. With those two parties, the PSD and the PNL, kind of losing support and becoming less dominant than they used to be, for RMDS and for the Hungarian minority, their representatives, they kind of have to rethink their alliances a little bit. They're going to have to. The landscape is shifting. The landscape is shifting.
It's very difficult to find other coalition partners because the other options are not really
not great.
Not great.
From their perspective.
Yeah.
So along with that, as those parties, the PSD and the PNL, are losing support, nationalist parties, mostly the AUR, but also the Party of Young People, that POT, and the SOS, of which Shoshawaku is the head, they're growing in popularity. So again, in December, they got 33% of the vote, about. And it seems that proportion might grow. It is growing. From the sort of minority perspective, what's concerning about that development is that, I mean, certainly some figures within our especially have kind of highlighted some sort of minority rights provisions as a target they want to dismantle. So, I mean, I can't remember the details exactly, but back, a figure in College County was actually kind of making some derogatory remarks about Hungarian schooling. It's never great from the minority perspective when these nationalist parties gain more power because they're usually more hostile to minority rights provisions. They want, broadly speaking, I think it's fair to say that they want a country that looks more Romanian, sounds more Romanian, and if you're Hungarian, sounds less Hungarian, right? Looks less Hungarian. And yeah, online, in the kind of civil sphere, you could say, in the uncivil sphere maybe, there's now a little bit more space for people to vent these kind of nationalistic remarks. Again, figures like from the Iron Guard, it was kind of taboo to associate oneself with them or to say anything positive about them for a very long time. And we now see more of that kind of.
I agree. The
Yeah.
Iron Guard is actually, and their ideologies are outlawed here in Romania. And although it is against the law to support and sustain their ideology, nowadays those people who have these ideas, they vent them and they put them out on the social media platforms without any kind of consequences.
Yeah, and I would say kind of this last point here at a most fundamental level, as the public is sort of losing faith or losing confidence in these institutions, the court system is implicated or is involved in the Ceausescu affair. The mainstream sort of moderate parties are implicated in this ongoing affair with Ceausescu and the annulment. As public confidence in those institutions erodes, by extension, the sort of minority rights situation in the country is eroded as well, because basically the minority rights provisions that are in place are the result of years and years of political negotiations, whenever the Romanian, the sort of Romanian democratic system is threatened, whether that's institutionally or by the rise of kind of more overtly nationalistic parties, that isn't a great development for minority rights in the country.
Before my comments on this, what you just told us, Peyton, I would like to suggest to our viewers, if they have questions, to put them down in comments so we can answer them. Coming back to your idea, it is for the Hungarian minority, for RMDS, it has been always very important to find allies within the Romanian society, within the Romanian political system, because Hungarian minority being such a small one, 5, 6, 7% it used to be, they cannot achieve anything by themselves. And if you don't find and you don't have allies, moderate allies who are sensitive to your requests, you cannot achieve anything for your community.
Absolutely. So we would like to open it up to questions now. We can't call on people like a Zoom call, as it were, but if you have a question, please put it in the comments, and we'll stay online for a couple minutes here and see if we can answer any questions you guys might have. So I don't see any comments in there right now. Any questions in the comments? We'll give you guys another minute. Okay, we got a question here. Right, so we have a question about whether Georgescu is going to be allowed to run or not. This is a good question. What mechanisms are there to prevent him? Well, I'd first like to say, maybe Zolf can say something about the mechanisms, but I'd first like to say that we don't know at this point. It's been the assumption of a sort of political pundit class, if you will, that Georgescu wouldn't be allowed to run, but that wasn't rooted in. That was just a sense. That was just the assumption for a long time. But we're nearing that deadline, and nothing has materialized. So.
No, not yet. And well, actually, we have a precedence with Diana Șoșoacă, who is the president of SOS Romania. She was not allowed to run in the presidential elections of last November. They found some kind of technicality for which she was not allowed to run. Maybe they are trying very desperately right now, those in the government now, to find some kind of suitable technicality to not allow Georgescu to run in the presidential election. But it's very dangerous. I think this step would be very dangerous if you think about how high his percentages are right now.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, even before the annulment came down and there were rumors that there might be an annulment of the first round of presidential election results, a lot of moderate voices in Romania, including Kelemen Hunor, said that they didn't think it would be a great idea from the perspective of what's best for Romanian civil society and democracy, because every time you sort of bar someone from the election or you annul the result, you kind of add fuel to the fire, I think is the exact terminology he used.
Exactly, and if I remember well, even when Diana Șoșoacă was barred from running, even then, although Diana Șoșoacă I have to say she's a crazy person, Kelemen Hunor, he was saying that this is not right. We should let her run, and the voters should decide where she's placed within the candidacy.
Yeah.
So, but Georgescu's candidacy is a different kind of question, because it is well, there are suspicions that he did not run a clean man. He did not run rightly. He was somehow fishy, his campaign. So right now there's an open question about him being allowed to run in the rerun of the presidential elections or not.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Again, this is an evolving situation, but we're kind of nearing the deadline when candidates would have to declare their candidacy. That's coming up within the next month or so, I think, month or two.
Exactly.
So we just have to wait and see what happens with that. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we'll stay on for one more minute, but otherwise I think I'm going to close it out. And this has been recorded. It will be up on the HHRF page. And we hope to do more of these events in the future. So we're already kind of discussing maybe a March event when we could maybe offer some updates on what's going on here politically in Romania. And we're hoping to get some speakers on as well.
Yeah, some surprise invitees, hopefully.
Yeah, we're hoping to get some people in who have some interesting insight into the situation. All right, I don't see any comments, any questions, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. Thank you guys for tuning in, and just kind of stay tuned for more announcements, and yeah, we hope to speak with you guys in the future. Okay, we have one more question. Okay. Let's see. So this is a question about Táncos Barna's very difficult job right now. And so the question is whether, from a political standpoint, it's a good idea, whether it was a great idea to put Táncos Barna in the position of finance minister, given the challenges associated, Romania's economic challenges, especially with that sort of high deficit. Yeah, it's a difficult situation he's in, definitely. I asked the same question, actually. Why would you, is that something you would necessarily want to sign up for? But I think from the party's perspective, maybe if, maybe his perspective, I'm not sure. If they can get the situation under control, they can improve the financial situation, that will kind of speak to their competency as a party. And I will say that even just across Romania, among Romanians, not just ethnic Hungarians, but across the country, RMDS does have a reputation for having good ministers, for very competent ministers who kind of enact good policies. So, yeah.
The first reactions towards Barna Táncos, Táncos Barna, are very, very good in Romanian society, although he has a very, very bad, he is in a very, very bad situation. The Romanian finances, the Romanian economy, with this very, very high percentage of debt rate, he has a hill to mount.
Yeah. But if he does well, then maybe that will kind of boost the party's prestige going forward. Thank you for that question. So we're going to go ahead and close it out now. I don't see any more. Thank you guys for joining us very much. And as I said before, we hope to see you guys in the future. All right, take care.